It's my pleasure to introduce Andrew Olmstead. He is a keyboardist and a piano teacher in London, Ontario, Canada, with a background in improvised music. Formerly an active part of the Seattle music scene, he helped present a weekly music series and worked with a local record label, Table and Chairs Music, and toured as a part of the cartoon band Spooky Action. In addition to writing and performing his own solo work, he played regularly in several other bands. He moved to Chicago at the beginning of 2019 in search of even more music and creativity and spun off his own private lesson business, which he took with him to London, Canada. He teaches piano students of all ages about performance, improvisation, collaboration with other musicians, and songwriting. And today he will talk to us about lesson plans for video game music. I want to repeat that Jeff Kleinsorge highly recommended this presentation. He saw it at the ISMTA conference in 2021. And that's why he's here. So please welcome with me, Andrew.
Thank you. Thanks, Yumi, for organizing this whole thing, and Jeff for recommending me. And then among all the emails organizing, I saw their names, Cynthia and Chris and Eric. So thanks everyone who was involved, but of course, especially Yumi and Jeff. I appreciate that. And I guess I'll go ahead and I can pull up my presentation here. I don't know what's the best way here to make it so that I'm pinned or featured, or how, if we want to put it as speaker view, or
I think we are recording you on speaker view, and I pinned you.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. That's great. So if everyone can see my screen, that's great. I'm still looking at everyone, and I'll try to keep an eye on the chat if people bring things up. But I'll be bouncing between windows here to show some things and play some audio examples. So, let's get started here. So, my name is Andrew Olmstead. Andrew. And yeah, hi. I'm Andrew. I teach piano and songwriting. You mentioned I'm in London, Ontario now, but I used to live in Chicago. That's how I heard about all this. Right now I mostly teach one-on-one lessons, but I also have taught group lessons in the past, group classes, workshops, but everything's online. And I like to give my students a lot of freedom in the lesson, what we're doing. But I promise I never lose control of the lesson. Okay, maybe sometimes I lose control of the lesson. It happens occasionally, okay? This is Fluffy, and that's Fluffy's cat. Okay, that's another dumb joke. I'm sorry. There's going to be a lot of these types of jokes. So just some background information on why I started thinking about this in the first place. This is a quote from my hero, Zoltan Kodály, on he's talking about a single experience will open the mind of a young soul to music, but this talk applies to older students as well. A lot of people play video games nowadays. And I might be preaching to the choir here. You probably all know already about Zoltan, but he was a Hungarian composer and music teacher. Wrote a lot about teaching music in the classroom setting, and had this great idea about what repertoire we teach. There's the old debate at the time, should we teach music that was written for the purposes of teaching music, or should we focus on teaching the classics? It's kind of like a false dichotomy, but Kodály believed that we should teach what he called the mother tongue music first, which is the music that the students already know and love, right? In his situation, this was Hungarian folk music. But it's true. Students love to learn the music that they already love. And it sets up a strong foundation for learning other types of music and relating to music in general. So that's kind of where I'm coming from here. Yeah, familiar music provides a strong foundation. Okay. So here are some examples, music that was written for pedagogical purposes. We've got Bartok's Mikrokosmos series. And on the right is a book called Musical Monsters, which I like teaching out of for the really young students. It's a movable toe system. but I'm sure you all have your favorites. And here are the classics, right? I like teaching out of Keith Snell's Essential Piano Repertoire series. And on the right is maybe a modern, the classics type book, which is a fake book of jazz standards, things like this. But when it comes to video game music, what is the educational material? Today's lesson is less about teaching them to specifically play video game music, sheet music. Although if we have time at the end, I can show some examples that I've made with students. But it's more about using it as a tool for creative listening and music theory and some other things here. You know what? This question mark should be updated. Let's make it, yeah, that's better. A little bit more video game music going on here. So, generally speaking, what are we going to cover today? This is my own little phrase, idiomatic music theory, which we'll talk about. Why video game music is different than other types of music. And VGM, you'll see this abbreviated for video game music a lot. Save some space. The two, in my opinion, the two most important components that affect how video game music is written and learned. And we're going to go over a generalized lesson plan and maybe two specific examples that I have that I've used in the past many times. But what is this idiomatic music theory idea? So this is my own little phrase, but by idiomatic, I mean particular to a style, a period, a genre, a group, particular to something, right? And then when I say music theory, I'm not talking really about how music works in general. By music theory, I mean a useful way to think about music. Because there are multiple ways of thinking about music. Most of the time, when I say music theory, I'm thinking about Western music theory, right? Tonics and dominance and form and all these things. But there's different ways to think about music. And so when I say idiomatic music theory, I'm talking about a useful way of thinking about music that's particular to a specific genre or style of music or a way of listening to music. Because I think it is different whether that music was, if it's jazz music, for example, or if it's a sonatina. The way that those two pieces of music were originally composed is very different. So maybe, in my opinion, it's good to teach the students music theory that's related to how the composer originally thought of it. So here, this is about video games, right? A useful way of thinking about music particular to video games, video game music, right? This is more just kind of general background stuff before we get into specific examples, but some benefits of idiomatic music theory that I've experienced. In my opinion, it gives the students a more accurate view of how music works, right? Every type of music, has form, right? So you can talk about form, but not every type of music the composer was thinking about form in the same way. So it's this is just my opinion, but this is kind of what this talk is built on, this general idea. It helps the students retain the music theory they learn because it's related to something very specific, right? It seems more grounded to them. I think it exposes them to a wider variety of musical thought. In video game music, the students are already listening to video game music, so they're already exposed to that. But still, this is useful, I think. And it gives them a lot of aha moments. All those moments where they say, I get it. I see this music theory. And then when they play video games later, or if you're teaching film music and they watch a film later, they say, I recognize that sound. I recognize that mode or that form, that stylistic idea. All right. So how is video game music different than just film music in general. When I was first started teaching, I think it's just been over 10 years now. That's kind of why I started doing these talks a little bit more, because I finally feel like maybe I have some semblance of an idea of what I'm doing. I'm not sure, but at that point, a lot of students were asking, hey, can I play this music from a TV show or from film? But then more and more they were asking about video game music, and I noticed it is different. So these sorts of ideas that I'm going to list off here, these 3 ideas, are less commonly found in video game music, even though they're very common in film music. And this is great to talk to the students. They'll find this interesting, and it helps get their mind thinking about this type of thing. Timed emotional, but when I say beats, I don't mean rhythms, I mean moments. These emotional moments that happen at a specific time or sequence are less common in video game music because the player has control of the narrative. If somebody's playing a video game, they control the speed at which the events unfold. So it's not impossible. There are things like cutscenes and other type of theatrical events where they'll have these sorts of emotional beats, but it's less common. I mean, the player could pause right in the middle of the video game at a very emotional moment, right, and totally ruin the emotional vibe in the middle of their video game. So these types of things are less common. Also less common are complicated form structures. Not because video game music isn't complicated, or it can't be complicated, but because a player might be doing something for a long period of time. They might be performing an activity for 30 minutes, right? And if the form's very complicated, then the way it loops or the way it repeats can be very noticeable to the player, can take them out of that environment. So generally speaking, complexity in video game music is created instead using orchestration or layers of orchestration that can vary over time. And then character leitmotifs, this staple of 20th century film, are almost completely gone. Not completely gone, but they're much less common. Character leitmotif, this idea from opera, the musical theme. Tell me, when you see these images, do you think of a specific piece of music, a specific melody, right? The Imperial March, the 007 theme, I don't know what it's called, right? It's got some name, right? Now, The Godfather is interesting because there's that melody, that sort of melody. It's not really associated with The Godfather. I'll get my face out of the way of The Godfather for a moment. There we go. It's not really associated with The Godfather. It's more associated with his estate or his location, which is kind of interesting. That's not really a character leitmotif. It's a location leitmotif. And that is common in video game music. So we can go into detail there. All right. We're going to get into more of the nitty gritty. What is video game music really about? If it's not about these forms and emotional pacing, what can it be? Well, I think it's made up of the setting of the video game, where they are located at that specific moment, and the action, what the player is doing, right? This one's really specific because you don't really have, in film music, for example, or a TV show, the person is idle when they're watching it, right? So when you tell a student this, that when they can think about video game music in this way, their minds will be blown because it is so relatable to someone who is asking you, can I play music from this video game or this theme, or can we talk about this music that I love? Because they will have felt like they have been in this setting before doing these things. You know what? Let's go to some examples. This is the generalized lesson plan. We're going to look at the general overview, and then I'll give you some little examples too. Oh, I don't even remember putting in that image. I'm sorry about that. Okay. Here you go. Teaching video game music. This will be the screen you want to remember, probably. First of all, what is the setting or the action that the player is in when they listen to this video game music? After that, find other music with a similar setting or while they're performing a similar action. And you can borrow music from film or TV also for this. Then you can have them compare the related music, try to find the commonalities or the differences. And then you can reinforce their comparisons with music theory, listening exercises. I'll move my head again here. And I'm going to pause a second here. If you want to write this down, although I'll put the slides on my website. You were all just talking about updating your website. I've got to update my website too to put this up there. But yeah, so this is a style of teaching video game music which can be done with basically any student, including younger students. I don't know if you all give listening exercises to your students or listening recommendations, but I highly recommend it so that they can start developing their own personal taste and style and preferences and their own way of thinking about music. So this can be done with students even when they're not able to play the video game music. And that's why I call this a really general plan, is because it can be used with basically anyone. So what are some examples of video game settings, right? You could be on a mountain or underwater, in a forest or in a village. Each of these settings will have different orchestral elements or different melodic elements, things like that, rhythms. And I really should have had a show of hands at the beginning to see who does play video games here. I know you don't have to play video games to appreciate this, I don't think, because so much excellent music is available online on the internet. You can find and listen to even collections of best underwater video game music, and you'll notice that they all have things in common. The music that are in forests, you'll hear things like pan flutes, or if you're on a mountain, there's lots of percussion for some reason. It doesn't really, these sorts of ideas predate video games. They date back to not just movies, but theater in general. What type of orchestration would have fit in a certain setting, for example. But video games can be especially unique because they're so specific. You're not just on a mountain, but it's during Christmas. Maybe you're snowboarding, right? Or you're underwater, or in a submarine. I mean, these are very different musical themes. If you think about, The Hunt for Red October, the music in that is so intense and tense when they're in the submarine. Whereas underwater music is usually would be relaxing or atmospheric. And you'll find that they're oftentimes combining these ideas, like combining the forest and the village ideas, so that you get the activity and cheerfulness of the village, but then you get the pan flutes from the forest, and it combines all these ideas, right? So this is sort of the setting. Let's look at some action examples. These are things that affect the music based on what the player is doing. And these are some weird ones, but these are all from real video games. I didn't make these up. Like exploring a haunted hotel, spooky music. Fighting terrorists with surgery. I did not make this video game up. This is a popular one, in fact, right? Defending a client in court. Right? It's not just shooting games or games where you're beating people up or jumping around. Video games have some really a wide variety of actions that and when you tell the students, hey, go find other video games that are in haunted locations, or find other music that's related to defending people. You know, you like this song from Ace Attorney where you're defending a client. Listen to music from film or from TV where there's famous courtroom scenes, and compare and contrast what's going on between them. Do they have anything in common? Action music for trying on new clothes really blew my mind about 6 years ago when I started to realize a lot of students want to learn the music that is not associated with actually playing the game, right? This really popular shooting game, Fortnite, the students would come to me and say, I want to learn music from Fortnite, and I thought it would be one of the dances or one of the themes where you're shooting at someone. But a couple people wanted to learn the music where you're picking out what clothes you're going to wear before the battle, because it's this strange, bubbly, kind of you're at a mall shopping feeling, but also it's relaxing. And I see Terry in the examples here. Yeah, can you provide us examples of this kind of music? When we get into 2 specific examples, I'm gonna have several minutes of playing audio for you to listen to. So we'll pick a setting, and then we'll listen to a bunch of music related to that setting, and then we'll pick an activity, and we'll pick a bunch of music from that activity and we'll listen to. So we'll be getting that to that shortly. But I do encourage you after if you want to go online and type in best haunted video game music or best lawyer related video game music, best underwater video game music, there's a lot out there to listen to, and you can listen to it without playing the video games. I certainly can't afford to buy every video game that comes out. So when a student tells me that they want to learn music, I usually just listen to it, and maybe I'll look at some pictures to get an idea of what the game looks like. So yeah, there's that trying on new clothes example I was talking about. All right, so this is a specific lesson plan example. Let's talk about setting. If a student comes to me and says, I want to know more about how video game music works, but they don't have a specific thing that they want to learn, or I'll oftentimes use racing video games to get them to think about setting. And also, Terry, you got me thinking. At the end, too, we will have time. I can show you some specific sheet music that I've made also. So you'll get a chance to see some specific examples there. But speaking generally about setting, why racing games? Why are racing games a great way of exploring the setting of music? Well, it's because the action is always the same. You're always racing, right? So if video game music is made up of setting and action, well, this removes the action. You can't have a slow, strolling type of music when you're playing a racing game. So this kind of isolates the element. Every track is set in a different environment with racing games, right? And there are hundreds, that's conservative, there's really thousands of video games out there to compare. So if you have a racing game that's set on a snowy mountain, you can probably find pretty easily 20 other racing games that have video game music for snowy mountains, right? So the specific one that I picked out, maybe 3 minutes of audio to listen to, is the volcano, a volcano setting. Not all of the audio I'm going to show you is from racing games. I kind of mixed it up a little bit, but all of these games are in a volcano setting. And these are the sorts of elements. You know what? I'll take this off screen for a moment. Try to think, if you were writing music for a volcano, what elements would you have? you could think about the orchestration that would be involved. Think about the tonality involved, melodically or rhythmically what's happening. It's interesting because it kind of has this fire element, but also this mountain element, right? And sometimes it even has like a cave element if you go inside the volcano. So there's a lot of variety there. These are the things that I tend to hear when I listen to this. And we'll go over this list again after we listen to the audio, but these sorts of rumbling, active bass lines and percussion. There's some notes about the instrumentation here. Oftentimes you'll hear echoed or delay on the notes if you're inside the volcano, right? Which is kind of something that's common in cave sounds. And yeah, a lot of really interesting chromatic harmonies and things. So we're gonna start off with the video game, with the racing game that I started at the beginning, that I showed at the beginning here, and then we'll go into the other audio here. I'm gonna hit start the audio. If you can hear it, if somebody could just give me a thumbs up once it starts. But here we go. Hold on a second. It's not. There we go. All right, so yeah, and I want to take a moment here, if we can. I don't know if people want to put things in the chat or unmute for a second. But was there anything surprising there, or anything else that jumped out at you? I mean, I don't want to be patronizing, but I'm curious, right? Because everybody hears different things, and that's something that I like to hear from the students as well. I don't know. If nobody jumps in, that's totally fine also.
I was surprised how percussive it was, and the speed was what I noticed most.
Oh, yeah.
Question, are these all theme music? Because I had a couple of students bringing me some of their music, and I felt like it had a theme and was a little bit more melody than what we heard right now. It sounded to me more as background music when you game something is going on, but I might be wrong.
No, that's really interesting to think about. You know, what is the theme? You know, part of the issue is that we're listening to very small segments of this music, and when people play older style video game music, definitely has a more concrete melody. Oftentimes, that'll jump out at you. So some of the more timeless video game music people might bring to you will have more of a specific melody, and that happens with these too. But for a lot of these sorts of setting ones, it can be more abstract, and it's surprising what a student will remember. I'll play a version of it, and that, you know, because I think, oh, it's kind of abstract. Maybe they won't get every element, and then they'll say, wait, no, that was wrong. Something's missing, and it's because if they've spent a lot of time playing this game, you know, potentially hours, they'll have heard this loop many times, and something that to you and I might have been a small melodic idea or a small bass line might have become a crucial ostinato for them, or a crucial idea that they've really keyed in on, right? So part of the interesting side effect of students learning this type of music is sometimes they'll come in and they'll really want to learn something kind of abstract or interesting, you know. Oftentimes the ones that we end up learning to play have more concrete melodies or things that you could sing, for example. But yeah, I think that's interesting. And you commented, Margaret, about the speed of the music. Sometimes, depending on the level of the student, of course, a lot of this music that we just listened to has some pretty intense arpeggios that were clearly written for a computer to play and not a mere mortal such as myself, right? So part of the interesting thing too is that I can give students, if it's a song like something from The Legend of Zelda that I've taught a million times, I can give them sheet music for that. But if they come in with something more abstract like this, it ends up being a little arranging lesson, or a little lesson in score reduction, where they can, which is usually a really advanced idea that an intermediate student wouldn't be able to do, but they'll have opinions on what's important to keep and what is possible to change. Can we take that 30-second note arpeggio and turn it into 16th notes or 8th notes? Or can that become a block chord? Is that still recognizable, right? So that's part of the challenge and the fun in doing this. I should have said it at the beginning. You know, when I held up the, well, I didn't hold it up. I just had it on screen. But in case anybody's, you know, feeling like I'm tossing out all sorts of things, I still have the, you know, these are my classics, you know, things. I've got the Bartok here, which I don't teach out of much anymore. I've got beginning piano repertoire, you know. This is what I'll be teaching out of today. So I don't throw these out. I forgot to mention this. This is not related to volcanoes, but I thought I should mention that. Usually this is, you know, if I'm doing a 45-minute lesson, 10 or 15 minutes can be spent on some other music that they really love or are interested in. But they're going to be playing their scales and their arpeggios, just not 64th note arpeggios, right? Three-handed. So, all right. Should we go on to the next example here? Okay, I'm seeing some nodding heads. Hopefully not too enthusiastically nodding. Just move on. All right. Here we go. Lesson plan 2. Well, the last one was about setting. This one will be about action. And if racing games are the perfect genre of video game to teach the setting element, I believe that tennis games are a great way to get people thinking about action. If they come in, they say, I want to learn something specific, we'll do that. But if they're just curious, I'll say, let's dive into tennis games, which are a favorite of mine. I never would have guessed this 10 years ago, but why? Why tennis games? Well, the setting is always the same, right? It's like the opposite of a racing game. You're always in some sort of resort or country club or you know, some setting like that, right? Usually fairly relaxing. And there's, again, really there's thousands of games to compare. The first video game ever made was, a precursor to Pong made on an oscilloscope. So it was a tennis game. And there's more actions than you'd think. You'd think, well, it's just hitting a ball back and forth. How many different actions can there really be? Right? But this is another element that's unique to video games. Let's take a look at what I think is kind of like what became the template for all tennis game music, which is Super Tennis in 1991 for the SNES. What made it so great was the menuing music, because when you play a game, it's not just the actual part where you're playing the game. We talked earlier about picking out your outfit before you play a shooting game or something, right? Well, here you're going to select your game type, how many sets and things like that, what character you're going to play. There's a little music that plays before you actually start playing tennis, right? There's, if you're in a tournament, and you're going to be playing up against Germany next, you might hear some vaguely German-sounding music or something. Whether you win or lose, I love this screen. I don't have win-loss screen audio examples for you to hear, but they all sound like the Weather Channel. It's strange. When those statistics pop up and they're saying you got this score, this one, they're all kind of like watching the Weather Channel. So this is kind of what I'm talking about by different actions, right? Of course, in a video game, you can have other actions like fighting or running or something like that. But yeah, I think where Super Tennis really set the bar high was the title screen. And the title screen is the screen that you see when you first turn on the game. So you're really not doing anything yet. So what is the music that plays? It's called the title screen because it has the title of the game. It says, "Hello, this is Super Tennis, press start," or something like that, right? But the title screen has to get you excited to actually want to play the game. A good title screen puts you in this odd situation where you want to hit start and play the game because you're excited, but you want to just sit there and listen to the music because it's so good, right? So it's like a beautifully wrapped gift in that way, right? You don't want to destroy the wrapping paper, but you have to see what's inside. So this is a strange idea. And unlike, having you think about what music would be in a title screen, I'll just tell you because it's kind of a strange idea if you haven't thought about it. But look at the elements here that are adding suspension and adding tension and excitement. These ostinatos, these pedal points, dominant and non-diatonic chords, all these sorts of harmonies where parts are staying still and other parts are moving on top, right? And it's bright, it's brassy, it's getting you excited, right? So these are things that I hope you hear in the next little audio example here. So just a moment here and I'll cue that up again. And while I'm doing that, by the way, just thanks again for having me talk about video. I get so excited about this stuff. So, all right. Here we go. We're going to start off with Super Tennis. That started it all. All right. Yeah. I love this music, right? And again, this is not music that I'd think about if somebody said, "Hey, um, I want to learn this music from this game," right? I wouldn't think that it would be the music that has you waiting to press start, right? Um, but even in a game like this, even waiting is an activity, right? Even waiting is an action that needs music, right? And the best title screens have people sitting for long periods of time just listening to that music because they love it so much, right? So, um, so yeah, don't be surprised if a student comes to you and says, "Hey, I want to learn this music." Try to ask, what's happening when you're hearing this music, right? And they might say, "Oh, it's a pause screen. I'm not doing anything. I just hit pause and I just sit there and listen to it because I love it so much," right? Um, the Halo series of video games, which is another shooting game, is people have uploaded the title screen music for that game to YouTube in 10-hour blocks. So you can listen to that title screen music for 10 hours if you want to, because it's so relaxing but ominous, and it strikes this. And I see people, see Terry, you're laughing, but it's true. It's true, right? So of all the Halo music, that's the one that people want to learn, right? Unfortunately, that music is much slower. It does not have the massive arpeggios. So that is one that I've taught before because students can learn that. In fact, it's simple enough that many of them, because they've listened to it for so many hours, it's a perfect ear training exercise, right? They can find the melody themselves. So I'm going to go, well, let me see here. This is where I'm going to stop to do questions. I have sheet music that I want to show you because I think we've got time still. But I want to stop here for a moment. Does anybody have any other questions about this sort of video games as a way of talking about music theory and listening exercises before we get into sheet music real quick? And I'll pause for a moment here and get some water. If not, that's totally fine too. I've got other stuff to show you. Do I always have sheet music? Great question. Usually I have the students. If the students are at a more beginning level, I'll make some quick sheet music. Oftentimes during the lesson, I'll make it in. I use MuseScore because the students can download MuseScore and learn to edit their music too when they get to a little bit more of a intermediate level or early beginner level, really. So I'll make a little sheet music if it's something simple that they can play. As they get more advanced, I have them help me make the music. So but I don't typically use music. You can buy, some video games will have licensed books and things like that. With, these, it'll be like 6 pages of very advanced music typically for somebody. So it's not very practical for most teaching purposes. So instead, we'll learn a part of, I'll say, hey, what part should we learn? Let's just learn the bass line. Let's learn the chords. Julie asks, how much time do I spend playing video games? I'm not sure. It's definitely several hours. Maybe I'll play an hour or two a few times a week or something like that. But it's for me, it takes the place of kind of watching TV or something. I'm not a big TV watcher, so I probably play about as much video games as I used to watch TV, things like that. Um, so, but I would say that actually years ago when people were coming to me to play video games or to play this type of music, I didn't play very much many games at that time. So kind of as I heard more and more music, it made me want to play more games, actually. Is there any value in just teaching by rote? Kind of. I mean, I don't teach by rote a lot myself because I want the students to, just my personal style, I'm trying to give the students their own independence, their own freedom from me. I want them to be able to learn things without me as soon as possible. So I try to give them sheet music or a little tool or maybe an ear training exercise and have them write it down if they need to. But yeah, for this purpose, we don't do much by rote. With the younger students, maybe we'll learn a small segment of a melody or something if they're really excited about it. But yeah, I try to use this type of music as a way of hooking them into other things that they wouldn't do by themselves, like thinking about music theory or transcribing or things like that. It's great for that. And then Yumi has an addendum. Oh no, that's totally fine. Perfect. But yeah, what are your thoughts on virtual reality games teaching piano? That's interesting, right? Because and not just virtual reality, but there's a lot of things on the phone. Students can learn piano by games, the sorts of edutainment. And I kind of feel similar to about them as a lot of maybe like YouTube videos on how to learn piano, things like that. They're useful for a certain, to get a certain level, but it's difficult because playing piano, it's so personal to your body and your preferences and things like that. Those types of things certainly haven't replaced a private instructor, just like apps like Duolingo haven't replaced getting a book or a dictionary or some software to teach you a language or a private teacher, right? Because they're half designed to entertain the student and half designed to actually educate them, right? So they make a severe compromise in that way. I hope I'm entertaining in some regard, or at least engaging is really what my goal is. But the thing that I do think is good about games that teach music to students is that private lessons are expensive, right? And I have to admit that to myself, even if I do a sliding scale or something like that, not everyone can afford that. So if there's a free app or resource that somebody can find on their phone or online that can teach them, I'm for that. That's good. Yeah, and Terry's asking, do I actually prompt the students? Hey, what video game music would you like? I do prompt students to tell me what music they like, what they enjoy. And when I say so, I say, my kind of line is like, hey, what music have you been listening to lately? Anything from TV, movies, video games, commercials, grocery stores, elevators, right? As the list goes on, I try to list more ridiculous examples. You know, when you go to the bathroom and there's music playing in there, you ever listen to that, right? At the restaurant. So I prompt them to always be telling me what they like. And it naturally comes up that they'll say, can I play this, movie, this music from a movie or from a video game or something like that. So, yeah, how do you introduce the complex rhythms? A lot of this video game stuff is highly syncopated, especially like that volcano stuff like that. And when I pull up some sheet music here, if we have time, if it's okay for me to keep going, you'll see that a lot of very difficult to notate rhythms and read. And I usually tell them not to worry about it. If they know the music by ear, I say focus on the notes and figure out what rhythms feel right to you. This is a little bit like teaching a student a dotted quarter note if they listen to a lot of rock and roll music, because there's tons of, ba bum ba bum ba. If they know the music, you give them the beat, they play along, and they recognize what a dotted quarter note looks like, and it kind of sinks in over time. So you can do that. If it's really something intricate that they're having trouble with, I use Takadimi, stuff like that. One-E anda, whatever their level is, we'll use a counting system like that to say the rhythm out loud. For pretty much all rhythms, I'm a proponent of having them say the rhythm before they play it on the piano. If you can't say it, you can't play it, I guess, right? And thanks. Elena said, I hope it's Elena. I bet students love you. I hope they love me, but that's because I have family issues and a deep-seated desire to. No, I want the students to enjoy music for a long time. Should I pull up some sheet music real quick? All right, thorough nodding of heads. So, first, a warning: if you don't teach students to play this music, they will find it online. And what they find is not good sometimes, in my opinion. Here's my little coda, right? A warning. So, and I don't mean any disrespect to Josie101, who wrote this. This is on musescore.com, where a lot of students will search for sheet music. And you have these staccato, tenuto markings on every single note, virtually. And you'll see this third measure in, you see this a lot, an eighth rest at the very end of the measure, because maybe they were listening to the music and they noticed it was slightly shorter or there was a little space, but rather than put in a breath mark, they have a rest. Or maybe they even downloaded the original audio file somehow from the video game and it was programmed this way to give it a little space, so they left it in there. So you'll find little weird artifacts. Sometimes you'll find a bunch of staccato quarter notes, but they wrote them as 16th dotted eighth, 16th dotted eighth, 16th dotted eighth, right? So you could find things like this. And this is another example of something I found online. These are all from the video game Undertale, which is a very popular, has a lot of difficult music in it. And this one isn't terrible here in the first ending, but notice the stretch from the A to F sharp in the first measure, the first ending. The student is going to be trying to play that with their pinky and their pointer finger, and then going to octaves with A. And meanwhile, their pointer finger is going to be hovering over F sharp, and the students who are searching for music this way, they'll hurt their hand, or something. They won't be ready for it. They won't know how to handle that. Or here, when there's a key change in the same sheet of music in the next line, they change to the key of C flat when the music's actually in G flat. So for the next 2 pages, there's F naturals written on every single F, right? So, and again, they're not gonna know. They're gonna say, "Hey, I can play this. It looks fine to me," right? If they're a beginner, they're like, quarter note, eighth note, I can do that. They're right. It's hard to tell when music is difficult. Here's another one, right? An overzealous use of octaves, I think, right? Which this is how it was played in the original, the computer played it this way, right? But yeah, I just, the students will find this, right? And what do all of these 3 examples have in common from Undertale? All of them had perfect 5-star ratings if they search on musescore.com. These are the best ones that they could. Now, there are really good arrangements out there, but the student's not going to know which one to grab. You can use musescore.com as a way, if you want, to find admittedly unlicensed sheet music for these video games, typically unlicensed. But yeah, let's see here. But yeah, so this is the type of thing that they may be finding, or they might find this. I'm not sure if you've encountered this type of thing before. I see sad nodding of heads, which I'm glad this resource exists for some students, right? There are people who can learn to play to a shockingly high level that I don't understand using a video like this. The falling notes, right? So, but it's like the squishiest way to notate a rhythm of all time. It's very difficult, and this basically learning by rote. It is learning by rote when they have this type of resource. Someone said, my kids learned Rushy this way. Yes, yeah, absolutely. Oh, Rushy. I should have used that as an example, right? Let's see. One of my students is learning Mario Overworld and Underworld for a talent show, having trouble with the rhythm, and asked me what aim level it is. It has 64th notes, so you had to divide. You know, that's inspiring that they're up for the task. I'm reading the chat here. This difficult notation. Sometimes I'll I'll rewrite music for them and divide it a different way. Put it in cut time and write it in eighth notes or something. But yeah, 64th notes. This is what the students can be finding. Let's look at some sheet music that I actually made with students. If it's okay that we're still going here. Because we started just a little bit late. The main theme from The Legend of Zelda is basically like teaching Hedwig's theme. How many times have you taught Hedwig's theme from the Harry Potter music? Well, I don't know if you've all taught it before, but this is a version that I made with a student. And notice that I didn't put a key signature, but I notated all of the B flats. And that's because a couple weeks later a week later when they learn this, little hands divided in two version. I don't know that this is a perfect arrangement, but I said, wouldn't it be great if we could just put one flat and all of those B flats would be flat? You wouldn't have to see it over and over again. And they said, yes. And I said, guess what? There's a way to do that, right? And they were it was the most excited person I've ever seen learn about a key signature, right? And I said, we'll just put the flats over here. And they were very happy. Here's another great one from The Legend of Zelda, Song of Storms. This one was arranged by a student with me. They picked the bass notes, right? And I wrote out the melody and they picked the bass notes. Here's another, this one has a difficult arpeggio in it, but the student was so excited they practiced a lot and they could play it well. Here's an Undertale music, and look at the syncopation. This originally was written, it probably should be written with 32nd notes, 16th notes, and things like that. Very difficult syncopation, but we tried to simplify it out a little bit for them. This is a funny one because the student wanted to learn this music, which was originally from the movie, but they had heard about it because they had played a Star Wars video game, right? So this student was at a very early level, so we wrote this out and we really used it more as a way for them to practice reading notes on lines because they were having trouble learning line notes. So I wrote it in a way where they would get a lot of practice with that. Let's just fast forward to something more complex that a student made with me. This was great. This student loved the Yakuza series of video games. I didn't even know that there were 5 or 6 of them. But for a recital, they learned 3 pieces of music from different video games from the same series, the Yakuza series. And for their recital, they played 3 of them in a row, and that was the closing to our recital, right? And it was so sweet that they had a chance to do that. This one was one with block chords where they were learning about inversions and things. So these are some examples. I was hesitant to show these because I don't have, this isn't licensed or anything. It's the equivalent of having someone transcribe, kind of. So some more questions here. How do you go about simplifying some of these themes that are so complex? I typically ask the student what they think is the most important, right? And because I might not have listened to the music as much as they have, and they might really gravitate towards one thing. So you might just learn the bass line, or you might just learn the chords, or just the melody. You saw some examples there where they were learning the TIE Fighter theme song, and I split it up between two hands so that this beginner could play dun, 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 that theme, which originally has in the background with strings and stuff, right? But or sometimes I'll have them sing it. If I can get them to sing, I'll say, hey, try to sing it for a second. And what they sing is the part that they remember, right? And we can focus on learning that element. Would I be willing to send Hedwig's theme arrangement? I think I probably have a copy. It usually depends on the level of the student. I think I can do that. Here, I'm going to put my, let's see, in the chat here, andrewolmstead@gmail.com. I don't know if you should give it that, but email me afterwards with maybe the general skill level of your student. I'll see if I have an arrangement I can send. How do your students feel about playing a hard video game piece, then going back to playing regular pieces? Especially if they learn by rote on the hard piece. I try at all costs to avoid having students get beyond their skill level I go back and forth on this. Suzuki wrote that students can learn, they can learn to read sheet music later. Maybe I'm generalizing, right? But in one of his books wrote that they should learn to perform. If I'm understanding this correctly, learn the joy of performing, and if they have trouble reading, they can learn more about that later. Nowadays, I really try to focus on getting the students reading everything, because it just means that this parent doesn't have to be there to help them, and I don't have to be there to help them, and it ends up with a lot more amazing things, like them coming to me and say, hey, check out this thing I wrote, or this thing I made, or can play. So it's kind of like teaching for Elise. I really don't want to teach them for Elise if they can't play the other pages, right? But yeah, but sometimes they really want to play for Elise. So okay, all right, we'll do it, right? It's the same balance there. It's the same balance. Yeah. Do I sell these arrangements? No, I don't sell them. They're not licensed. I have been thinking about just putting them up on the website. Here writes that Faber's does have an arrangement of the Hedwig theme. That's great. I'm sure you should get those types of versions. And I've taught out of their Harry Potter books. I don't remember if it was Faber, but years ago I did teach out of that. But for me, the difficulty is finding a book that is at the student skill level for this one song that they want, or something like that. But I just visited my family for the holidays down in Texas, and I came back with all my childhood books. And I've got a Disney book that's all, Pocahontas and stuff like that, right? The things from my childhood. So I did enjoy having those types of books when I was younger too. Yeah. So I don't sell these arrangements. If you have a specific example, please send me an email or something. I'd love to do more of this. And I think that's it. I think that's all I have. So we started a little late. We went a little late, but I hope that's good. Any other questions? Any other questions, just email me. But
That's wonderful. Thank you so much, Andrew. It was very informative. It was a little different from the traditional classical repertoire that we have normally, but as you saw, there was a lot of interest. Thank you so much for explaining us the nature of game music and the actions, so to understand for us, also to get into the student's mind. I was especially impressed by how you pulled up the sheet music, because my understanding is that you were not prepared to show that. And I'm very impressed that you can teach by rota, but I was thinking for myself, ooh, I don't know if I would feel comfortable. And then suddenly you pulled up all these examples, and I felt like, phew, that would be my word to start with. And you did
Yeah.
it so flawlessly and had all these different examples up. That was wonderful.
Thank you. Yeah. Well, it was really fun for me to go back and find those examples. I wasn't sure if we would have time to show them, but I did ahead of time write down examples that I wanted to show. It's fun to go back over the years and try to pull out the best. Basically, I only showed you the sheet music that makes me look pretty good, right? There's a
Yeah.
lot of really bad looking sheet music for, video games that I've made. So, but yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I'm glad we had you here and that you provided us with your email address. So whenever we have a question or want to do some game music, and it seems like you can pull that very easily together, we have a person to go to. So thank you so
Please.
much. It's clearly a trend. You see all these kids are very
Yeah.
going wahoo about game music, right? So yes. Okay, thank
Absolutely.
you so much. Thank you for being here, and we'll see you all in January.
Thanks
Thank
everyone.
you. Bye. Bye, Andrew.
Bye.